The War of Art. Steven Pressfield. Imagine sitting down at your desk, a blank page before you, your fingers poised above the keyboard. You know exactly what you want to create. Perhaps it's a novel that has been whispering in your mind for months, or a painting that calls to you in quiet moments. Yet as you prepare to begin, something invisible but unmistakably real rises up to meet you. It whispers that you're not ready, that you should check your email first, that maybe tomorrow would be better. This force has no name in common parlance, but it governs more creative dreams than perhaps any external obstacle ever could. What is this shadow that stands between you and the work your soul longs to create? Steven Pressfield calls this invisible adversary resistance, and in doing so, he gives form to something every creative person has felt, but few have clearly identified. Resistance, according to Pressfield, is not mere procrastination or laziness. It is an active, intelligent force that grows stronger the closer you come to work that truly matters to your authentic self. It is the voice that tells the writer not to write, the artist not to paint, the entrepreneur not to launch. Yet understanding resistance, Pressfield suggests, is not merely about unlocking creative potential. It's about understanding the very nature of what it means to live with purpose in a world that often seems designed to pull us away from our deepest calling. In our age of infinite distractions and constant connectivity, how do we recognize and overcome the forces that keep us from becoming who we're meant to be? The most startling aspect of resistance is its intelligence. You begin to notice, once you're attuned to its presence, how precisely it targets what matters most. Resistance rarely interferes with busywork or tasks that keep you spinning in comfortable circles. It saves its ammunition for the projects that would fundamentally change you, the creative endeavors that would require you to grow into a larger version of yourself. This selective targeting reveals something profound about the nature of meaningful work. It inherently involves a kind of death and rebirth, a shedding of who you were to become, who you might be. Pressfield's insight illuminates why starting is often the hardest part of any creative endeavor. Resistance knows that momentum is its enemy, that once you begin to move toward your authentic work, each step becomes slightly easier than the last. The blank page is resistance's strongest fortress, but the page with a single word written upon it has already begun to crumble those defenses. You realize that resistance feeds on the gap between intention and action, growing fat in the space where dreams remain safely theoretical. The concept of turning pro emerges as Pressfield's central strategy for combat. But this professionalism isn't about making money or achieving external recognition. It's about developing a sacred relationship with your practice. The professional shows up regardless of mood, inspiration, or circumstances. This idea challenges our romantic notions about creativity, suggesting that the artist waiting for the perfect moment or the ideal emotional state is actually serving resistance rather than art. When you examine what it truly means to turn pro, you discover it involves a fundamental shift in identity. The amateur approaches creative work as something that happens to them. Inspiration strikes or it doesn't. The muse visits or remains absent. The professional understands that creativity is something they actively participate in through consistent, disciplined engagement. This doesn't diminish the mystery of the creative process. Instead, it creates the conditions in which mystery can unfold. Yet Pressfield warns against losing what he calls the amateur spirit in the pursuit of professionalism. The amateur loves the work for its own sake, approaching it with fresh eyes and genuine curiosity. This paradox, being simultaneously professional in your discipline and amateur in your wonder, points to a deeper truth about sustainable creativity. You must be serious enough to show up consistently, yet playful enough to remain open to surprise. This tension between discipline and openness reveals itself in the daily practice of creative work. You sit down to write or paint or compose with professional commitment, but you must also cultivate an amateur's willingness to fail, to discover, to be changed by what emerges. The professional creates the container, the amateur fills it with life. Without both elements, creative work either lacks consistency or gradually loses its vitality. In our contemporary world, where productivity culture often reduces creativity to mere output, Pressfield's framework offers a different path. The question isn't how to be more efficient at creative work, but how to develop a sustainable relationship with the forces, both internal and external, that shape our creative lives. When you scroll through social media instead of writing, when you reorganize your workspace for the third time this week instead of painting, you're not being lazy. You're engaging in an ancient battle between growth and stagnation. The modern landscape presents resistance with unprecedented tools. Digital devices offer infinite escape routes from difficult creative work, each notification a perfectly timed interruption when you approach something meaningful. Yet this same connectivity also reveals how universal the struggle truly is. The knowledge that every creative person throughout history has faced their own version of this invisible enemy can be oddly comforting. You're not uniquely flawed for struggling. You're participating in humanity's ongoing negotiation with its own potential. Perhaps most intriguingly, Pressfield suggests that resistance itself serves a purpose. It acts as a compass pointing toward work that truly matters. The intensity of your resistance to a particular project often correlates directly with how much that project would stretch you, how significantly it would contribute to your growth. This reframe transforms resistance from a purely negative force into a strange kind of guide, helping you identify which creative paths lead toward your most authentic self. The key insight that emerges from this exploration is beautifully paradoxical. The very thing that feels like it's stopping you might also be showing you the way. When you feel that familiar tightening in your chest, the thought of starting your novel, that voice telling you to clean the house instead of sitting down to compose, you're receiving intelligence about what matters most deeply to you. Resistance teaches you to distinguish between the work that would merely pass time and the work that would transform time into meaning. This understanding leads to a profound question that extends far beyond creative pursuits. In a world full of comfortable distractions and safe choices, how do you consistently move toward the growth that your soul craves but your ego fears? How do you build a life that honors both the discipline required for meaningful work and the wonder that makes such work worth pursuing? As you consider these questions, you might notice a different quality of attention settling over your thoughts. The battle with resistance isn't won through force or willpower alone, but through patient, persistent presence, showing up to the work with the regularity of breath, the faithfulness of seasons. Perhaps the greatest victory isn't the elimination of resistance, but learning to dance with it, to recognize its voice while choosing to listen instead to the quieter call of your deepest creative truth. In this dance, you discover that the obstacle itself becomes a strange kind of teacher, and the very force that seemed to oppose your creativity ultimately serves to refine and strengthen it into something worthy of the struggle.